The Phillies over-under would be 81. You could go prop swap that if you like the over. Buy it now, see how that changes, because this team has a little different vibe around it all of a sudden. Or do they? Do they not? We'll see. We'll talk to Phillies beat writer Scott Lauber from the Philadelphia Inquirer right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as he joins us for a look at the Phils spring training. A little different feel at spring training this year, Scott, as a lot of the particulars are still not there in terms of the fans and even the media guys. But I guess so it's hard to kind of feel how this team is kind of gelling. What would you say is the most intriguing storyline to you with this team?
No doubt. This is an easy one. Center field, because it's the one position on the field where they don't have they don't have an everyday player, at least not right now, and they've got a number of guys competing for that job. It's not just two guys, fighting for one spot. It's Scott Kingery and Roman Quinn and Odubel Herrera, and if you want to throw Mickey Moniak into that mix, eventually Adam Hazley will get healthy, and he'll have to get put into that mix early in the season. So there are a lot of guys. No one has run away with it so far. We can debate who's looked most impressive. I twist that and I say who's looked the least bad, because I don't think any of them have really knocked anyone's socks off. So, that to me is the most interesting thing. The bullpen is always interesting too, especially after how bad the bullpen was last year. But we know how bullpens go. Relievers get shuttled in and shuttled out. And I think that they're going to start the season with an 8-man bullpen. And you'll probably see twice that number of guys by June in that bullpen in one fashion or another, because guys come up and go down. So for me, it's center field without a doubt, and they've got about 10 days now, close to 2 weeks, to figure out who's going to be their opening day center fielder.
No, Scott, how viable of a candidate is Herrera? I mean, there's some people that you talk to and say he's not on the 40-man. They don't want to deal with it. I mean, he's played. I don't want to say he's knocked his socks off, as you kind of said, but he's played well enough that I guess you got to at least consider him. Is he a realistic everyday candidate? Is he in the mix to platoon? How do you see his candidacy?
Well, if we were talking even as recently as probably 7 days ago or 10 days ago, I would have told you that he didn't have a great chance because of what you just said. Not on the 40-man roster, hasn't played in a year and a half. Basically, lots of catching up to do. And I think through the combination of the fact that he's played okay, he had a home run today. He's hit, I think now, 3 home runs this spring. His at-bats have been pretty good. The combination of that and the fact that Kingery and Quinn have not really reached up and grabbed the job, and in Scott Kingery's case, he's really had a bad spring. I think Herrera's chances are actually pretty good. In fact, I'd probably 2 weeks out from opening day, I'd probably call him the favorite at this point to maybe be the opening day center fielder, or to be the guy who gets the majority of the playing time early in the year. I just, if they're going to go strictly on performance in spring training, so far he's winning that competition. Now, the question I keep having is, with a guy like Kingery, everyone I talk to with the Phillies kind of agrees that Kingery gets a mulligan for last year because he had COVID-19 at the start, in June, and at the start of summer camp, he was first getting his strength back and coming back from it. And then he had a couple of injuries during the course of the season, and it was a 60-game season, and you can toss it out. You really can't draw too many conclusions from it. And if that's the case, if that's how you feel about it, are you putting more stock into his spring training? Or are you just going to, he was in the opening day lineup last year at second base. Can you put him out there in center field, tell him to bat eighth, tell him to try to catch everything that's hit to him, and, he'll figure out his swing as he goes along? That's really the one way he's going to do it. He's got to play to figure out some of the changes he's trying to make to his swing. So I think they've got some decisions to make. How do you feel about Kingery, and how much do you put on Odubel Herrera and the spring he's had?
All right, so how viable of a candidate is Mickey Moniak? I mean, here's a guy, I thought last year just looked overmatched, overwhelmed, almost as if they were doing him a favor. Hey, you were the first pick of the draft. We're going to let you come up here and play some games. And it was almost as if he knew it, and he looks like a totally different guy. So would you call him a viable contender to play center field?
If spring training meant everything. Like if they were just judging a guy on how he's played, he's probably the one who's played the best out of the group. But I don't think he's as viable a candidate as the other three guys we've mentioned for the simple fact that he's not starting very much in spring training, which means he's coming off the bench a lot, which means he's facing generally more relievers than starters. I haven't taken a close enough look at this, but I'm guessing the level of pitching he's seeing is not quite as high. And normally, if a guy is really in a battle, he's getting reps early in games against starting pitching. I remember covering the Red Sox several years back, when Jackie Bradley Jr. won the job out of camp. And for like the first half of camp, he was batting like .430, and he was coming off the bench. And we were like, well, how much of this is real? Because who's he facing? And then he got a chance to play more and start more. And I remember him hitting a home run against Cliff Lee in spring training. And you were like, oh, okay, now this means something. I haven't seen Moniak get that chance yet enough. I mean, he started yesterday, but that was the first start he'd had in a little while, I think. And he just hasn't had as many reps, it doesn't feel like, against quality pitching as the other guys. I think with Moniak, what they want him to do is start the season and play every day. And that's going to mean going to the alternate site and getting his at-bats against, whoever it may be. I think the alternate site in Lehigh, they're going to play the Yankees and Scranton a lot early in the year, just to kind of get another team, in the mix so that they can see, better competition than just each other. And I think that's what they want him to do. They want him to play every day, get at-bats, and continue to grow as a player, because you got to remember, he didn't have a minor league season last year. So what you saw in the big leagues was really what it was. And he's got to make up for some lost time.
Scott Lauber covers the Phillies for the Philadelphia Inquirer. You mentioned the bullpen. This is interesting because it was so bad, and now there's so many arms. It's almost as like they're overwhelmed. Not that they have this great bullpen, but they got a lot of interesting options. You mentioned 8-man bullpen. They got about 12 guys for 8 spots, it seems like.
Yeah, right before I hopped on with you, we were talking to Joe Girardi after the game today, and I actually, I asked him, would he consider a 9-man bullpen to start the season? He's sort of been locked in on the number 8. Just because so many guys have pitched well, and they are going to have some tough decisions. And, what do you do with a guy like David Hale, who's out of options? Do you put him on the roster? You can't send him down without exposing him to waivers. How about the non-roster guys like Kinsler and Watson, who they like a lot? A guy like Sam Coonrod, who does have options but has pitched well in spring training. Do you send him down simply because of a roster flexibility thing? And you can do that. And Girardi said he's still focused mostly on 8 in the bullpen. Now, I suppose he could change his mind in the next 10 days or 2 weeks, decide to keep an extra reliever around. He did note that nobody knows how last year is going to affect this year. So from a pitching standpoint, are you going to be able to turn a starter loose early in the season the same way you would normally when they didn't have their normal workload last year? I've written about this a lot, and I think it's going to be a question that teams grapple with all year. How hard and how far can they push guys throughout the season coming off a year that was incomplete last year? So, he did note that, and I guess that leaves him some wiggle room as far as like carrying an extra pitcher. But, so far they're locked in on 8, which means they're going to have some tough decisions to make in that bullpen. And I can't believe I'm saying that because of how bad it was last year, that they're going to have to decide between too many arms when I think a lot of us felt like going into spring training that maybe they didn't have enough.
Scott, obviously, like the 5-man rotation, I don't know, do you feel like is settled with Moore and Anderson winning those spots, kind of quote-unquote winning? Then what happens to Velazquez and Howard? Did they fall into the bullpen mix? That's 2 more guys who would be here. I got 8 guys written down, not including Velazquez and Howard. Do they have a shot to lose the starting nod and move to the bullpen?
So, Girardi has not made any declarations yet, but I think based on the way Matt Moore and Chase Anderson have pitched, that they are most likely going to be the 4th and 5th starters to begin the season. It's just that's the way it's trended. They have earned it, and if you're going to go with the best guys you've got, those are the best options they have right now. Now, Howard might be answering a difficult question for them because he's had back spasms the last few days. He was supposed to pitch 2 days ago against the Yankees did not. They're being careful with him. So I think it's setting up where, he missed an outing. I don't know if he's going to miss a full turn yet. I don't think they know, but you could see that they'd be like, all right, he's a little bit behind, go to the alternate site and get some innings in. And you can see them bringing him up relatively early in the year if there's a need. But, his little hiccup now with the back spasms might be giving them, making that decision on him a little easier. Now, Velasquez is another story. He's if he's the odd man out in the rotation, he could be. We've talked about this for the last, how many years has he been with the Phillies?
Too
for
long.
That entire time. Yeah, for the entire time, we've been talking about bullpen versus rotation and what's the best use of him and all of that. I think Vince Velasquez, if he puts his mind to it and he accepts the role, could be a weapon for them in the bullpen. But you also want to keep him stretched a little bit because he is still, essentially your number 6 starter or your number 7 starter, and you're going to need 6, 7, 8, 9 in the rotation at some point during the year. Or he could be traded. There's been talk of that. He talked about that himself the other day, not knowing what his future holds, whether he'll be moved in spring training or not. I tend to think this is just a guess. I tend to think he's going to break camp with the team and be kind of a long man in the bullpen and be sort of like their 8th guy out there. I think there's still value to having him on your roster as insurance, starter insurance, and a potential bullpen weapon. So I think he still factors in. But, if somebody comes to them and says, hey, we'll give you a prospect or even a mid-level prospect for Vince Velasquez, do you say, look, that $4 million salary and that, oh, by the way, that 40-man roster spot that you're going to need because you're going to want to add guys like Kinsler, Matt Joyce, maybe Odubel Herrera, Tony Watson, you're going to need some 40-man spots. Do you say to yourself, well, maybe offloading Vince Velasquez is going to be the best thing for everyone? I think they still have to kind of kick that around a little bit.
Yeah, and, at the end of that bullpen, if we kind of talked about Velasquez, I don't know where he fits in, but you've got Romero, you got Suarez, you've got Brogdon, who's in the mix there. You've got Hale, as you've mentioned, who's pitched well, Coonrod, Watson. So I don't even know that he's the best option to be one of the 8 guys in the bullpen, although I feel, Scott, they've done him a disservice. They should have just said from the get-go, focus on being a reliever. They gave him these ideas that he's in this race for the rotation, which it doesn't seem that he is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's ever been given like they've never said to him, okay, you're a reliever now. Go commit to that role and own it. Like it's always been, we're moving you to the bullpen, but, one tweak here or there, one guy goes down in the rotation, you're the first guy back in. So it's kind of like 1 foot in and 1 foot out. It hasn't quite been fair to him. You talk to him and you get the feeling that that maybe he doesn't quite know how he fits either. I think a fresh start for him somewhere else would be a good thing. The question the Phillies just have to ask themselves, like I said, is it worth, you're going to need more starting pitching, and is it worth having him around, or is it worth having his roster spot and his money?
All right, Phillies off tomorrow, and then they'll finish out the last 10 days or so of spring training. A lot of questions to be answered, as Scott just kind of chronicled. At Scott Lauber, doing a great job, of course, covering the Phillies, as always, for the Inquirer, as this is a very intriguing spring training, and he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Good to see you, Scott.
You too, Mike. Happy to do it.
All right, take care. We'll talk to Scott again throughout the baseball season.